Hi, welcome to the video. So today I'm going to talk about and teach some concepts from this book, The Advancing Guitarist by Mick Goodrick. And the concepts I'm going to touch on today include triads over bass notes, interval exercise with some variations, counterpoint, derivative parallel, single string scales. Don't be intimidated by some of the names. This stuff's pretty straightforward once you see me doing it and I explain what's going on with it. What made me think about this book again recently, I'd probably bought my copy of it over 30 years ago, and it'd been a few years since I've looked at it, but recently I saw a Facebook post by Skolnick from the band Testament, and he's got his own jazz trio now, and he says it's a book that he recommends to most people, and it's always a book that I've liked, but again hadn't looked at recently. So upon looking through it again, there's just so much that you can learn from it. I want to expose people to it and teach some of the ideas from it. It's not really a method book, though. It doesn't really explain things that well sometimes, so it's really aimed at, if you're thinking about buying it, intermediate to advanced players. One thing that Alex Skolnick said in his post, though, that even if you don't play the musical examples or exercises, that there's enough ideas in it that it's worthwhile, and I agree with that. And if you are thinking about buying it, just a word of warning that the exercises are written out in standard music, but there are also, again, large sections of the text too, which has lots of ideas within it. So even if you can't read the standard music, you can still get something out of it. Okay, so let's jump into it. So I'm going to start with the scales. So basically on this section, it's talking about derivative scales and parallel scales, which you can see it wrote out here. And then the next page, he talks about listing them in the order of brightness, which I'll get to also. So I don't usually use the term derivative scale. So what that basically means is, excuse me, my reach getting a pick, is when you play derivative means you're driving it from something. So you're creating like a Dorian scale from playing the major scale on the second note of it. So if I'm playing the C major, the D playing the same notes would be a Dorian. If I played from the third note of the major scale, I'd get a Phrygian scale. So that's how most people would just consider like playing different scale positions within a key or positional playing. The advantage is you can cover the whole neck in one key, and that is a great advantage, and that's how I teach students first, is playing and just memorize the positions. The second way, the parallel, isn't taught as much, but I think it definitely has its benefits still. Basically what you're doing there is you're playing them all off the same root note. So instead of playing C major, D Dorian, E Phrygian, etc., you're going to play everything off C. Now what that allows you to do is hear the difference between the scales more so. So if I play a C major, for example, and then I play the other two major scales, the C mixed Lydian, that has a flat seventh, in it. Or if I play the Lydian, that's got the sharp 4 in it. So you can kind of hear this difference in the sound between them a little bit easier. Same thing if I play the minors, I can hear like a natural minor, and then I play a Phrygian, I can hear that flat second, and you can kind of compare them. So rather than, a way you can apply this is both by understanding the sound of the modes more so, but also when you see a minor chord, you can pick any of your minor modes to put over it depending on what type of sound you want. So in this second page I was talking about, he lists them in order of brightness. So let me play them in that order, and I think you'll be able to hear fairly easily what he means by that. So if I'm playing the Lydian, that does have a nice bright sound. That sharp 4 makes it just resolve nicely into that fifth, the major seventh, same thing. Now if I play the regular Ionian or major scale, that's what you consider the second brightest. Not quite as bright as Lydian, but still more than the rest of them. Mixed Lydian. Again, that flat 7 makes it sound a little less bright. Then Dorian, that has that major sixth in it, which still has a kind of a brighter sound than if I did the flat 6. Then Aeolian has a flat 6. So, and Aeolian is the same as a natural or relative minor. Phrygian, you had a flat 2nd, which creates a little bit more dark sound. And again, they're just changing that one note from the previous one. Locrian has a flat 5th and a flat 2nd. So definitely a darker sound than if you're doing like a natural minor or a major or the Lydian. So this is the parallel playing. That's kind of a nice way to be able to hear it. And then if you're over a major chord, you can pick which major sound you want over that. You don't necessarily have to think what do the chords around it create, maybe an implied key or a key, maybe even very obvious key on it, especially if they're staying on the chord for a while. If they're quickly changing to other chords in the key, then you might do this less and just stay in the key. Okay, single string scales. I actually just did a video on moving along single and 2 strings, and I'll put that up in the corner. Basically, the video I did is taking in sliding or shifting between different 1 or 2 string groupings on. The advantage of learning single string scales is, which just means playing your scale up a single string. If I play from A to A, that's an A minor scale, same notes if I play it here. But you can see the intervals a little bit easier, and it gets you moving in different directions, so you're not stuck in one position, but you can then combine your position playing and your single string to kind of move through different positions more easily. Okay, so anyways, that's kind of the 3 ones he talks about. Let's go ahead and move on to the interval exercise that one of the ones he shows on this. So basically on this, he's using it what he calls note math, or finger math. And he's taking the thirds and basically just playing. You could play this in any scale, it doesn't really matter. So you might be doing different combinations of major and minor thirds, that doesn't really matter. So if I did it, for example, in A minor, you're just playing one measure of thirds, moving through it in eighth notes. And they're assuming all ascending thirds, meaning each, root third, and I'm saying key, so it doesn't matter if they're major thirds or minor thirds on that. Then you do descending also. So do a measure of those. And then he shows the way that whole page was 16 different combinations of how you can mix and match those in every possibility. Still ascending the scale as a whole, but using maybe ascending and then descending. Or doing 2 ascending and then 2 descending. So you can mix ascending, 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 descending, ascending, ascending, descending, descending. You can mix and match those in combinations, and if you do every combination of ascending or descending within those four beats, you end up with 16 possibilities. He then takes it to the next step, and that's why there's so much possibilities in this book. He then shows different possibilities. So he then says, okay, if you take and combine 2 of those measures together, you got 16 possibilities, and our 16, which gives you 256 different possibilities. Now, I'm going to take it in a different direction from that. I'm going to say, most of the time, I'm not going to play 8 beats of triads. Not triads, thirds on it. So I find that to have less value. Writing down the 16, I think, is good because it gives you a way to make sure you've done every possibility. But most of them, you're going to play some more often than others. And one thing I would do first off is taking a descending scale too. So we were only ascending, so I could do the same thing and do descending down the scale using the 16 different possibilities also. So right there, that gives you 2 sets of 16 or 256 possibilities. But I'm not going to think about those because you're going to spend all day just trying to think of possibilities. Instead, I'm going to put into improvising more kind of right away. But not full improvising, just getting comfortable with it. So what I'll do is I'll take and do any combination, not really thinking about what I'm doing on, and move through the whole scale just randomly putting ascending and descending thirds to get comfortable with and to hear the sounds of different possibilities. If you're feeling comfortable with that and that's not too complex for you, you could take and start shifting and combining, your single string possibilities and your positional possibilities to move across the neck in thirds would be another step you could take. Then you start getting into the kind of more productive steps, in my opinion, and that's when you start making it sound a little more musical. So finding the ones you like. Maybe you like ascending followed by descending, or vice versa, and then add a scale or something to it, and then get comfortable enough with it that you can play it up to whatever speed you want to. So you start to create licks from it, or you start improvising from it. At first, maybe in a controlled fashion, where you maybe play a few thirds and then just do a scale round of some sort, and then do a couple more thirds and just can improvise back and forth from, I'm going to do a scale, I'm going to do a couple thirds, and you're not thinking ahead of time, am I doing ascending, descending, or whatever. You're just getting comfortable switching from thirds to scale, and again, you're getting closer to actually making music that way. So that's kind of how I take these exercises, and that's why these single little ideas can branch out into tons of possibilities. And it's he says right in this book that he's more pointing the way. It's up to you to find a method and to really get to go use this stuff. So let's jump into something completely different now. So let's do the diatonic four-part chords, which are what he says in these sets of possibilities. The primary symbol is the seventh chord terminology, while the secondary system is triads over bass notes. So he's writing them as triads over bass notes, as you can kind of see on this page. Which page am I on? This page. So let me just demonstrate what I mean by that. So, for example, the first one is an E minor. So if I play an E minor chord, and then he puts a C note over it, or in the bass. So let me simplify this E minor down to just like this. It's still all the notes of the E minor. Now if I put C over it, you've got standard fingering for C major 7. So thinking of it in this way, you'd normally call that just a C major 7. But by thinking of it as the triads over bass notes also, it allows you to kind of better understand it and realize that, yeah, you've got a full E minor chord inside the C major 7. Or on the next one, it shows a F major chord. And then put a D note over top of it. And that gives you D minor 7. Again, this is still my full chord. This note's a repetition of this one. So I still have my full F major here. So again, you can create these sevenths. I do this in some of my videos where I take different triads or seventh arpeggios and combine them together to make ninth arpeggios, 13th arpeggios. And it kind of gets you open to the idea of polychords, of two chords put together can create a larger chord shape. So you can create, and that's what he kind of does on these next pages. Again, he goes into a lot of depth on this. So he goes into what he calls hybrid 13th, hybrid 9th, hybrid 11th arpeggios. And what he means by that, for example, this next one is major 7th variation or hybrid 13th. So if I take this first one, it's a C major, and putting B in the bass. Well, the B is already in the C major 7, so it's the 7th, the major 7th from it. So really all this is doing, when I put a C major triad over, and then put B in the bass. And you can consider these, instead of saying a triad over a bass note, you can also consider them the slash chord and put the triad and then the slash in the bass note. It's just an inversion. So I've got the B, which would make a third inversion, major 7. But you could also think of that B still as the root, and it'd be a little less common way to think about it. But if I did that, here, let me show the next one. It's a little bit easier to see, and you can see more examples. So I'm going to do a D minor with C in the bass. So again, I do this minor chord, put the C in the bass, which gives me a D minor 7 with the, again, it just being an inversion. But now if I take that C And I'm going to play the D minor arpeggio just so you can see it easier. If I play D minor arpeggio, that's just the 2, 4, 6, or 9, 11, 13 of the C. So when I have that together, what they mean by hybrid 13 is, or what he means by that is, that you're leaving off some of the notes of the 13th. It's basically C major 13, but in this case it doesn't have your third or your major third or major seventh, so it's not really a full 13th arpeggio or chord. It's an incomplete one. So that's what he means whenever you're seeing hybrid on these. So it's kind of an interesting way to find different possibilities. And then, in these next couple pages, he continues to show these both in major, melodic minor, and harmonic minor, including 9ths, 11s for hybrids. So, for example, if I did a 9th, it's a little bit closer to the full chord than what the 13th was. So if I do it, it's a G major with C in the bass. If I do this, I can just bar that. It's got the root 5th, major 7th, and 9th. But it's still missing that 3rd. So it's still not the full chord, but because the 9th has fewer notes than the 13th, it's closer to the full chord. Because in both cases, I'm doing a four note chord. Okay, let's move on to this next thing he talks about on the kind of similar subject. And this is, we step on this, is taking your different triads, diminished triad, augmented triad, major triad, and minor triad. So you've got 4 different possible triads. You do that in all 12 keys, you've got 48 different triads, but then he says, well, some of these are kind of repetitive and have some of the same notes in them. So he knocks it down to 30 different triads, all put over the same note. So in this case, he's putting them all over a C note. So you end up with something like this. And then he goes down here in this lower section and analyzes what those create. And basically, you get 7 obvious ones, which in this case is a triad over a C. So those would be different types of C 7th chords, the diminished 7, minor 7, major 7, different possibilities. Then you get less obvious ones, which in this case would be the inversions, basically. So it'd be like a D flat over a C would then create a D flat major 7. All right. And then it gets, so 8 of the obvious, 7 of the less obvious or inversions, and then 15 hybrid structures, which are the hybrid 9th, 11th, 13th possibilities. All created by just putting all the different possible triads over a single note. Okay, so again, endless possibilities if you do that then with every note on it. And you're not going to use a lot of these, honestly, but if you can find a few new ideas from it, it's worthwhile. It's something that you can come back and try different possibilities at different times. The next part I'm going to talk about is counterpoint. So on this, just a second, let me find this section. Okay, what he titles this little section is Study of Intervals, Melodic and Harmonic, Poor Man's Guide to Counterpoint. So, and he says right here, here's a very simple way to look at it, but to me, simple is good. And I'm going to show you how these ideas you probably already have used all these before. So melody, he's just basically saying it's one note at a time. Counterpoint is study of intervals, 2 notes at a time, also 2 melodies at a time. And harmony is 3 notes at a time or more. So it could be triads, 7th, 9th, 11th, 13th, etc. So the different types, the 4 different types of counterpoint then, which you remember is when you have 2 notes at a time, is having parallel motion. So I'll go and demonstrate these. So a common way that you probably have already used parallel intervals is if you play a 5th interval, which is the same notes as a power chord, and you move them the same direction in the same distance, that's parallel motion. So any interval you did that with, if you take a major 3rd, and again, the definition of the parallel is just moving them in the same direction, both notes, the same distance. Now if I do similar, that's both voices move different distances but same direction. So, for example, if I'm taking 3rds but staying in a key, if I do a minor 3rd and then move up to a major 3rd, this note moved a half step or 1 fret, and this note moves a whole step or 2 frets. So I'm moving different distances but in the same direction. So anytime I'm changing the distance, but still going the same direction, that would be the similar counterpoint. And then the next one is contrary. So each voice moves any distance in opposite directions. So if you're doing something like this, and then the one descends and one ascends, or you do the other one and the other one, so basically moving closer, or they're moving away from each other, because again, one's descending and one's ascending. That would be the contrary motion. Then the last one's oblique, and again, it's commonly in rock, metal, and stuff. If you have one that's not moving, and so it says one voice moves while the other stays where it is. So if I'm doing something like this, that's the oblique. This note's not moving, the other voicing under it is moving. Okay, so that's the 4 types of contraptional. Whatever. Can't say it right now. Anyways, the different types of counterpoints: parallel, similar, contrary, and oblique. So I think I'm going to leave it at that for these. Again, lots of ideas in here. He doesn't necessarily explain them, so you're going to have to figure out some of them, but I think it's still worth looking at. If you want me to look at more of the ideas from here or get more in depth on some of these, I can. And thanks for watching the video. Please like or subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you next time.